Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of M365 Voice. I'm Antonio Mayo,
I'm Sarah Hawsey.
And I am Mike Madarani.
and today we're excited to have another guest with us. We have a longtime friend with us, Richard Harbridge. Hi, Richard. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. I think we've all known you for a very long time from the MVP program, and I think you were at Microsoft for a while and back to the MVP program. And maybe we could start with you telling us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing these days.
Yeah, I very much still focused on Microsoft 365, which nowadays is everything, including Copilot. And what I was doing is I had this services company I'd built up, and it's still doing well. But I actually recently switched because I wanted to just become a little bit more global, extend my reach and the impact, and do some things like that. So I joined Sharegate, who make most people know them for their migration tool, but they do not just SharePoint, they do Exchange migrations, a lot of migration around Gmail and things like that, a lot of other workloads, Teams, Planner, etc. And then they have these governance products as well that kind of add administration management layers onto Microsoft 365. So it's been really exciting because since I've joined, we have this wonderful research report that was released that has all these really interesting insights, because there's just never enough data for Microsoft 365 admins. And then I'm still a deep SharePoint geek from back in the day. And so it's been interesting, helping many customers get off of, that 2016, 2019 crunch right before the end of support, which is July of 2026. So it's very, very soon for most organizations.
Yeah, that felt like a long time ago, when we were rolling out SharePoint 2016, 2019, and yeah, it's next year.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know that you're a big data guy. You and I have had conversations about this. You love to analyze data, and I think you've got some recent insights from a report that you wanted to share a little bit of. Maybe tell us a little bit about that. Maybe introduce us a little bit to what that report is.
Sure. So the report's available for free for everyone. You just go to sharegate.com and you can grab it. Inside the report, there's a few sections. Basically, there's data on migrations. Makes sense. It's a common area, and there's just not enough data there. So that was really exciting to see. Mergers and acquisitions, which is actually on the rise. 80% of organizations, it's quite a few, are going through merger and acquisition. Either they have been, they're during, or they're about to. And then there's the security paradox, which, I'm sure we'll talk about the whole on-prem versus cloud thing and how that's still being driven today. And then there's some really interesting insights. This 1% gap is this idea of governance, and actually 99% of organizations don't use third-party tools at all for governance. They use native, they use manual scripting, they use other techniques. And, why is that and what's causing that? So there's some really interesting, deeper dives into there. So that's kind of what's in the report. And then, from a collection perspective, it's 650 IT Pro, Microsoft 365, IT Pro admin type people that have responded to the survey. The breakdown is across regions, US, UK, things like that. And org sizes are generally larger orgs for representation. Not anyone who's under 100 seats as an example, so not SMB. And again, very strong IT management leadership presence. So think of people who run Microsoft 365 for the most part. So there's some interesting insights there. My favorite one, since we were talking briefly about this focus on SharePoint migrations, is have you guys seen the recent news? There's been a lot of attacks on SharePoint Server recently.
Yes.
So there's
yes. Yeah.
Right. Those attacks are affecting SharePoint 2016, 2019, and SPSE, and they were addressed in 2-3 days, but there's still, a lot of customers are still finding that their environments have been compromised. There's just the challenge of maintaining your security patching levels on-prem. And it's still in support, right? So when it hits end of support, there's nothing, right? You'll see that on SPSE, but there'll be nothing for 2019, 2016. And so I think that's been a wake-up call for a lot of these customers. And it reminds me of the fact that, when we were looking at the data, I was amazed by this. I knew lots of people still had 2019 and 2016, anecdotally, right? We were at conferences, we talked to people, but 66% of orgs of this 650, which is, again, a broad representation of customers, 66% of them had those in production running. And then in that set, when you ask them like, hey, are you migrating? Like, how far along are you? 38% had no plan. They're not even in that planning stage for their migration. And that's pretty terrifying when you think of the fact that you have these attacks happening on these environments. You only have, we've all been in migrations that are crunched. Like, it's very stressful. So hopefully this type of data helps others realize that we got to move a little bit quicker.
This really surprises me. When we were talking before we started recording, right? And you're talking about 600 plus organizations ranging from at least 100 seats up to 5,000 plus seats, 66%. And I'm guessing hopefully many of these are running hybrid at least, right? Where they're not just on-prem, but that's a way higher percentage than I would have figured if we were playing card sharks.
Yeah. The issues are all the same we expect, right? Like, people say, oh, these are the things that are running and here's why, right? And then they give their explanations for, why it's being deferred or delayed or those types of things, or why the planning hasn't started. And again, planning, the anecdotal data is very clear. It's like, they just don't know. You don't know what's in your environment. So this complexity ratio of not understanding enough means you don't know if you have enough capacity. You don't know if you have the budget. So you defer it until you hopefully get those things worked out, and that leads to some of these cascading effects.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at the numbers here because I do a lot of migration, tons and tons of migrations. And interesting to know that the security compliance scores is still a high number. 20% is not low. It's like 20% of the entire response. Then yes, it is. It's always you get into the budget constraints and migration complexity, and you can address those, right? You can definitely address those. But the security compliance, it's still people really not understanding that more secure in the cloud right now.
Yeah.
Well, so that's interesting too. There's some other data in the later sections on the security and governance area, and basically they asked like, how confident are you in Microsoft 365? And again, I thought this was pretty positive, very confident, which is a pretty strong signal. We're all IT pros, we're all conservative. So them saying very confident was a really good signal. And then you had like that somewhat confident, and there were some questions on like why. But that was a barrier. So to your point, the curiosity of like, is that one of the things that's delaying these migrations? And it's because they require strict compliance validation. So you have to like do the here it is here. What's the equivalent over here? And there's expert quotes and stuff in the report.
Or they have a lack of compliance where they are. To go to where they need to be requires a huge funding load, not to mention subject matter expertise or even more funding to pay consultants to be able to help them go there. I just think a lot of companies, they can't even envision a bridge path between where they are on-prem to secure and compliant in the cloud.
Yeah. And I was having a chat with Joanne, who's another MVP friend of ours, and we were talking about this challenge, right? Like, there's this perception a lot of times, and it makes sense. So you're going to the cloud, so your data is going into a different type of container, and so you want to make sure you have tighter, better compliance, better security, because it's not really labeled here, but you describe it as, oh, this is on-prem, so it's more secure. Just, we'll talk about why that's inaccurate later. So what ends up happening is there's this perception that if we move it over, it needs to have all these things applied, like all the labels, in Purview, all that stuff should be set up. And the mental check here is, well, just having it enabled here is better than what we have here, because you can't even do that. There's really crazy workarounds for on-prem, but like, in order to even be able to do TPSM, right? Those wonderful reports for Copilot risk that we're all using that show you like, hey, this is the kind of sensitive information you have in your organization. You get that the second you move it up. So even if you do like a Delta migration and you keep the security off, right? Like, you just move the data, but you don't convert anyone. You're not actually doing a cutover. You can get all that DPSM data, and that is better than your posture in most cases in what you have on-prem. And so we were talking about that challenge of like, this perception versus the reality. Like, immediately you're going to get a lot of benefits in the cloud, even if you don't license E5 for everyone, et cetera. You'll get all this visibility, you'll get all this insight that allows actionability that you wouldn't have in an on-prem traditional scenario.
That number surprised me as well, because I remember, like you and like many people, I work for a fairly large consulting firm where we do a lot of work in the SharePoint and Microsoft 365 space. It was probably 2016, 2017, probably 80% of our work was in on-prem, SharePoint
Yeah.
on-prem, and maybe 2030 was in SharePoint Online. And then somewhere around the 2018, 2019 timeframe, that completely switched, where 80% was SharePoint Online, and we barely saw anything in SharePoint on-prem. And you're saying 66% of orgs still have an on-prem SharePoint environment.
So
and
one
not
of the
just that they're still running critical business needs through it. So it was
yeah,
even
like
more
production,
specific questions.
production's
Crazy.
grade, exactly, not like art working on decommissioning or something.
Yeah.
That I think there's two things to think about for that. And one, most consultancies, your value add services, right? Because you want to chase like a higher bill rate, et cetera. So the work that people are in Copilot, the work in other spaces makes sense because it's more of the leading edge, and that's where people need the help, right? Whereas, the SharePoint documentation for on-prem has been out for a long time. There's lots of people. I mean, it's a shrinking market now, but like there's lots of people who have that skill, and many organizations invested in those people, so they didn't need that external support for like maintenance and like keeping things going, right? The investment was in the cloud for many of these customers, and I think that's true for a lot of these customers even. It's just that I'll give you some anecdotal examples. Like one of these large customers, they have this document management system that they've customized on-prem, and they use it for a variety of reasons in this on-prem world because they've structured it. It's just highly designed for what they need. And so the work effort to modernize that and keep everything like for like is a lot, right? There's a lot of cost involved. There's a lot of complexity. And what's interesting for them is when they evaluated like Copilot and all these other things, they realized they could redo a lot of what they were doing here in a much faster and easier way, but they would have to change. And that resistance to like the change of the process was the thing that was creating a lot of the friction. So it wasn't like a technical challenge so much as like, how do we envision a map to this new dynamic from something that for some organizations isn't brittle in a bad way, but it's designed in a very predictable way. And moving into these other models, you've got to think about those consequences. And no one's excited to do a document management migration project, right? Those aren't very sexy projects. Whereas these AI agents over here are, but you can't be successful with these AI agents because they're not able to retrieve or work with core working data because that's still on-prem. And that's that Copilot connection we keep seeing is that there's actually another data point in the report. It shows in early 2024 there was what you'd expect, right? We see a decline in the number of on-prem licensed users, right? And we see an increase in the number of cloud ones, as you'd expect for tenant-to-tenant migrations, increasing and on-prem decreasing. But then you see this bump, and so this bump is because there's lots of reasons, but one of the main reasons is because many customers see the value of modernizing that data. They file shares, SharePoint servers, right? There's more value in modernizing that data because now we can use it and unlock more value with AI. And so now that we have that carrot versus just the stick of ends of support, now there's like this push, towards that. And I actually think, this is just misleading, but the data is most likely going to end up around here by the end of this quarter. And so we're seeing, a significant, like these are big numbers, significant growth. And then we'll again see that decline again because the market of those people on-prem will keep shrinking. But I think that's notable. And I really attribute a lot of this, again, based on different signals we're seeing to AI that's driving, this benefit discussion.
One topic that you raised that I'm interested in your thoughts on, Richard, is around the merger and acquisition use case, which I sometimes throw divestiture into that as well, which
Sure.
From a migration standpoint has similar effects where you're basically migrating content from one tenant to another.
Yeah.
And what are you seeing in that regard in the market?
So in the migration one, there's a couple things that are interesting in this report. Now, again, there's a whole section on migrations specifically for M&A. But in the M&A section, one of the first stats that surprised me, and I'll see if I can actually pull it since I didn't have it in my little pre-cut ones, but and again, it's a long report. I thought it would be quick to do a search for M&A, but it's taking a little longer. And again, if you don't have time to read it all, just read these little sections, have key lessons learned. Anyways, so in the M&A, it's right near the front. This was very insightful for me. So I thought, maybe 60% of orgs have completed an M&A or done one recently. This was a lot, so 80%. And and we see this in a few ways where it has a lot of impact. One, traditionally, an M&A for like SharePoint to SharePoint, Exchange to Exchange wasn't as bad because there wasn't as many interrelated services. But now we're seeing mergers and acquisitions where you've got not just Power Platform, which is its own, bag of tricks, but you have people who have agents. And you have people, SharePoint agents. We're calling them something else now, but like we have SharePoint Copilot agents. They have Copilot Studio agents, and even if there's just a few of them, they're becoming really key. These resources and the capabilities. And when you move, you move from tenant to tenant. What about memories of users? Like there's so many things that just get added and added. And this is just like examples of Copilot that add complexity to it. And so to me, it's interesting because even though all that's happening, when we talk to people on-prem and you ask them, again, those on-prem migrations we were talking about earlier, for them, they will say for partner, it's actually, I have the data here. Let me show you a real quick example because there's a correlation here that's kind of interesting. Sorry, I hit it because I didn't know if we'd have time. Yeah. So this is, and again, kudos to Sharegate for sharing insights about other competitors. So you can see here in the report, it talks about on-prem migration, specifically SharePoint. And you see 21% are using partners, 22% are using third-party tools. The rest are trying to do it with native. And in the report, it goes into like what happened. But this is very different for M&As. So in M&As, the percentage of partners is really high. I think I have, here it is. It's overwhelmingly 87% use of partners in an M&A. And it's because of these additional complexities, the timing, a bunch of things like that. And because it's worth the investment. And again, this was interesting. It's not really in the report. But one of the things you'll find is, it says 50% were involved in planning. The people in the survey who had the most short time windows for migrations and generally had the best success rates were the ones who involved a partner early. So they made a decision on the vendor, like if they're using a third-party migration vendor, and they made a decision on partner, for external support, backup, et cetera, to give their team capacity. That was overwhelmingly in the beginning. So if you have to have a partner, and you have no budget and you can only have it for one spot, then do it in planning, whether it's on-prem or M&As. And then that helps account for a lot of these risks that we were just describing. And that's definitely clear in the data.
Absolutely. And I can attest to that. I've done a lot of M&As, and your stat aligns with all my past experience doing all those migrations in terms of the complexity, raising the risk, getting us involved from day one, from the planning and analysis of the content and analysis of the tenant. And to your point earlier as well, it's not straightforward anymore. It used to be the SharePoint, OneDrive, and Exchange, and then SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange, and Teams, and then all Planner, the compliance, all the purview policies, everything that you have there. And now we got an add Copilot to it, plus the Power Platform apps and workspaces and everything.
Yeah, we had this purview feature that shipped recently, to migrate labels, and the demand has been insane around that. Like, to your point, you think of like, I don't know, we always look maybe conservatively and cynically, like not everyone's deployed, compliance at that level, but yeah, it's a surprising number because the areas they need that. They don't want to lose that fidelity.
That's right.
Yeah. And I think it's just, it is, I think the complexities around M&A, because if you're ingesting data from another company that you've acquired or that you've merged with your data set, it is inherently less trusted than data that is in your SharePoint on-prem environment. So the complexities of, are you going to pre-scan? How are you going to scan? How are you going to label? How are you going to secure yourself against terabytes or petabytes of data that you are bulk loading into your M365 tenant is huge.
Yeah.
And in mergers and acquisitions, especially if they're publicly regulated companies, you often have like hard deadlines imposed by regulators. You will be out by this time, and that turns it into a very high stress, short time frame project that often it gets whatever funding it needs for that to happen.
And they do have a short time frame for Microsoft to transfer the license, allow them to have this.
For
transition period,
other issues. That's a great
highlight. That's right. Yeah, that label feature to transfer labels from one tenant to another, that's awesome, cool. Because there's very few that do that, and there is no way to transfer the encryption keys from one tenant to another. There used to be, now it's not supported. So that is and there's one other partner that has that too. It's the only way to do that. Yeah.
Mhm.
So if you're acquiring a company that is using sensitivity labels and labeling content and emails throughout, you have no choice but
You'd
to
be
get a tool
surprised,
that does that.
even little things like when you, because you guys know this, when you move content around in an environment too, like restructuring happens all the time.
Yeah.
And when you merge and move this over here, think of like renames, rebrands, services combinations in a go-to-market. When all those things happen, you get a lot of this restructuring, like in Teams and SharePoint sites, and they all move over and merge and things like that. Well, it's similar on that side too, right? Because you have, I mean, what's two features that come out right now that are really exciting on the Purview side? One is the this default labels for libraries, right? So you can have like a library and has default label. So that's, I think, this month, August and September for release. And then the other one, these are in public roadmaps. And then the other one is active use. So like, what was the last time the file or content has been used? And then you can have a purview. I love that you can like have it based on the, the recency effect. Like, okay, this file is very inactive. Let's have this label escalation almost switch. And like, so you're going to see more and more as the capabilities increase in Purview and they become more accessible in these different, modular ways. You see more and more people use them, and you will see all of us, every Microsoft 365 admin, even if you're not a Purview person, you'll become one just because of the nature of how important it is.
Absolutely.
And then the only other thing I was going to highlight, and I know we're almost at time, is we've talked about security and compliance a lot, and that is overwhelmingly the challenge for both M&As and on-prem. But it's also, interestingly, the number one challenge post-migration. So when you ask people about like the post-migration sequence, right? So you're finished, yay, or you got this, new merged better environment in theory for posture. So now what do you do? And the number one issue, security access controls. And number two, managing governance policy. That's 33%, 31%. And number 5 is data sprawl and lack of organization. All of these, right? 1, 2, 3, all of these are directly related to the same subject. And that made sense. Like, that wasn't surprising. What was surprising to me was this data point. And so this question is, how are you managing governance and security then? And so 51% built in Microsoft tools, 43% manual policies. That makes sense because manual policies, you're scripting, you're adding something to it, right? But 5% not addressing, that's alarming, but it's always going to be alarming no matter what percentage it is. But the 1% using third party blew me away. And not because yes, I work at Sharegate and third party makes sense to me, but it's more the idea that so many used built in. This number at 51% really surprised me. And I think part of the reason you see these people struggling with security, governance, access controls is because they're using native, which again, you should maximize native, but a lot of the core capabilities have these gaps, right? Things that it just doesn't quite do. It doesn't take you to that extra mile that you need. And so you need to like build scaffolding around that. And the second you start to build that scaffolding, you need budget, you need time. And, I don't think there's a Microsoft 365 admin or a team that goes, oh yeah, we have the cycles for this. So then you got to promote why as a value proposition. And the only one we've seen consistently is obviously the Copilot attach. So you have Copilot, it's rolling out. We want to make sure we do improve security posture, around the sites that people are referring to, the compliance, have the content labeled. So that's helping put a spotlight on this where we actually get funding for it, which is fundamentally different than before. But it is, this is the same issue for migration. Before the migration, it's the same issue during the migration. It's the same issue after the migration.
Exactly.
And so I think, if anyone's in the governance, security, or compliance space, you're in good career prospects because it's definitely the biggest concern still.
Well, and if you look at where Microsoft is investing, this kind of fits with that, right? All investment in Microsoft is going to AI and Copilot. It is also going to security, compliance, and data protection, but in order to support the AI and Copilot workloads. So those are the two areas that Microsoft is truly investing in.
Yes.
So I know we've taken a ton of time, but just a few of the stats and the insights in the report. And we all need more data. So being able to even just go and say like, okay, here's what these experts are saying about this, right? This concern that we have is I think really helpful. Like this podcast, right? So being able to talk about these issues and getting that amplification of support. In fact, there is a cool stat. I guess I should have kept it up for a little bit longer, but I'll give you one more. There's this community stat that I love because we're all big fans of the community. And so, and again, it was an interesting one. So let me just share my screen one more time and I'll show this last one. So this was, which sources do you trust to evaluate your IT software? And of course you got Microsoft, which makes sense, analyst reports, but like really right up there was community forums and like communities in general. And I thought that was really exciting. Like that, we're in this together, whether you're going to a community day or you're, a part of a group like this, right? Like being able to like talk with peers is such a great thing within the IT space, because this isn't the same in other spaces. Like if you look at other industries and types. So just wanted to kind of share that as one of my favorite things.
So Richard, go ahead, Sarah.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, can you tell us where can we get this report from? You shared a lot of great insights, but somebody wants to read that. Where do we get that from?
So sharegate.com, and then it's just under resources and report. Well, maybe I can give you guys a link. You can put it in the description or whatever for the video. And then there's another, for all those are on SharePoint on-prem. Like I hear you, I'm here to help. So there's a ebook we did as well recently, and it's chock full of like all these diagrams and breakdowns of how to do everything. And it's meant to be more easy to digest instead of like these really dense. I mean, it is dense. It's like 50 pages or whatever, but like it's meant to be more easy to kind of grasp and understand. So it talks about SMAT, when to use it, when not to. That's the SharePoint migration assessment tool. How to map versus like Power Platform Stack versus other things. So that would be another resource I would recommend. So I'll give you both links and we can put them at the description. But both are on sharegate.com.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks so much for your time, Richard. Always a pleasure to talk to you. You've always got so much information and so many insights to share. So it's been a great discussion. Thanks.
And look, guys, we only did like 20 slides, so that's pretty good for me.
That is a record.
This is true.
That is one of those things that does not change, Richard. 20 slides is great, because normally in this amount of time, at least 100. So love it. Thank you so much. It's good to see you. Good to talk to you.
Absolutely.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.